Everyone. I hope you're doing well, and today we'll take up Module 3 for discussion, and thereafter we'll be taking up it for your comments, your observations, and if you all remember, Module 3 focuses on a very important life skill, and that is relationship skills. When you look at relationship skills, it has several aspects. And in order to be good at relationship skill or this particular life skill, we need to be good at a variety of associated skills. So in this session, I'll walk you through the world of relationship skills for about 15 to 20 minutes. And thereafter, we can engage ourselves in a discussion wherein we can share our comments, our observations, and our suggestions related to this particular module. So let's take a look at the most important relationship skills. We all know relationship skills are actually an ability to both establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. When it comes to relationships, starting a relationship is always easy, but maintaining it and sustaining it over a long period of time is a difficult task. But we also know that relationship skills are very, very crucial to our success in life and work. Once we develop the ability to establish and maintain healthy relationships, we can actually find it very, very useful, both in our personal and professional lives. So to be able to both start and maintain healthy relationships, we need to be good at communication, effective communication, so that there is no confusion, there is no doubt, and there is no misunderstanding in relationships. We should also be good at conflict resolution skills, because in relationships, whether it's personal or professional, there are conflicts are bound to occur. So if we know how to take care of conflicts, how to address and resolve conflicts, it'll be easy for us to take care of our relationships and maintain those relationships well. So a relationship is, in fact, a very special form of human interaction. And we need to understand that there are various aspects associated with relationship skills. For example, if you can recall from these video lectures from the module, I talked about how being self-aware helps us greatly in relationship skills, because if we can recognize our emotions, our needs, and our values, and then our strengths and challenges, then it'll be easier for us to understand how we can form and maintain relationships with others. Similarly, when we think of responsible decision making, this is a very important aspect of relationship skills. So making ethical and constructive choices about personal and social behavior. By social, I also mean professional behavior, because that's a mini or micro society. And then we can also think of various other skills like social awareness. If we are not socially aware, then it'll be difficult for us to both start and maintain relationships. And similarly, if we do not know how to manage ourselves, that is self-management. It's a very, very important life skill. Self-management means managing one's emotions and behaviors to achieve one's social goals. We all know when we move out and begin to interact with people, there will be conflicts, there will be misunderstandings, there will be controversies, debates, and heated exchanges as well. But if we know how to manage those situations, how to manage ourselves and manage the others around us, it'll be easy for us to address and resolve the conflicts and misunderstandings and build a healthy and valuable relationship with people around us. Therefore, our relationship skills are very, very important because we have to live in this society, we have to live in the company of people around us, we'll have to work in an organizational environment, we'll have to live in a family environment. So all we have to do is to interact with people. That's the most important thing we are required to do every day. So in order to be successful at all those tasks, we need to understand that there are a few relationship drivers that help us address these issues properly. For example, communicating clearly, leaving no room for ambiguity or confusion. If I can communicate my thoughts, my opinion, my views, my ideas, my choices clearly to the other person, there is less chance of friction between us. And listening actively, you all have discovered the power of listening, especially active listening, reflective listening, and relational listening. So listening can actually lead to building relationships. Because once we begin to listen to the others, we're actually doing several other things while performing the listening activity. Because when we listen to others carefully, attentively, and then with concern, those people feel special. They feel they're being cared for. And that will help us build a strong bonding or relationship with them. And then seeking and offering help is not a bad approach at all. Most people think if they go to people and share their problems with them and request them to come forward and help them, it may be treated as a mark of weakness, vulnerability. But that's not the case. A vulnerability is, in fact, a very important skill. I must know how to be vulnerable at times. If I'm facing a certain challenge, if I'm facing a certain problem in my life, there's absolutely nothing wrong if I go to my friends or a person whom I trust, I'm comfortable with. If I go to such a person and say, I'm currently facing this challenge, so can you please help me out? So that will not be a sign of weakness, that will be a sign of strength. Remember, millions of people are moving towards the realm of the dark. We can call it developing suicidal tendencies or developing depressive disorders, isolating oneself from all interactions and entering the dark realm or the dark zone that we call the zone of psychological problems. So most of these problems are generally due to this particular behavior, this particular attitude, because most people think opening up or seeking and offering help to somebody or seeking help from somebody is a mark of weakness, which it is not. And then negotiating conflicts constructively, because there are better ways to resolve and negotiate conflicts. If we become good at those skills, then we can be good at relationship skills. And then, of course, empathizing and cooperating. We all know that people around us are different in terms of their upbringing, different in terms of their cultural grounding, and then their choices, their values, their beliefs. We all are different from each other. So the best way to understand the person is to approach and speak to the person and then empathize with them. What are the key relationship skills? By now, you are probably familiar with those key relationship skills, releasing positive emotions. We never want to go to somebody who releases negative energy or negative vibes. If somebody releases positive vibes, we feel like going to the person, interacting with the person, and being friends with that person. So positive emotions are very, very important. If I always exert negative emotions, people will not like me, and they'll never like to have any kind of bonding with me. Perspective taking. Most often we forget that there is the other person who may have a different perspective than ours. If we continue to forget that, that will lead to strained relationships or failed relationships. If I know how to take the perspective of others, then I can win that situation. I can say, yes, you're also right. So it's almost like I'm right and you're not wrong. That means both of us are right. And sometimes if I say, I'm wrong, you're right this time, that's not a bad approach. So if I'm taking the perspective of others, it's not a bad approach. I'm actually building that trust in that person. And then smoothing is a very important relationship skill. Smoothing. Sometimes, when while discussing a certain topic, if you discover or if you realize that things are rapidly going out of control, and very soon things may lead to a conflict or misunderstanding or serious conflict, then you can think of switching the topic very tactfully without even letting the other person know that you're switching the topic, because you can see or you can foresee a conflict, and that will help. Or smoothing, okay, fine, let's forget and let's talk about something else. So smoothing is a very important strategy or a key relationship skill that can be used to take care of people and our relationships. And when it comes to some other things like, boosting self-esteem. When we help another person get or develop self-esteem, that person will feel one with us. That will lead to a very strong relationship with the person, because if I can boost the self-esteem of people around me, that is the biggest contribution I can make to their lives. And that will lead to a very strong bonding between us. And then reflective listening. You all know reflective listening is a very powerful listening strategy. And with reflective listening, we can always take the perspective of our speaker, people who are speaking to us, and then we can make them feel special. If somebody is sharing something with you, and at regular intervals, if you're replying to the person by saying, yes, I can understand that. I think you're right. I think that's exactly what you wanted. That means the person feels assured. And such approaches will lead to a strong bonding or relationship. You might have taken a look at how it is not a good idea to live on the autopilot mode. That means live a mechanical life, so that you leave everything to the mechanical happenings. Things will happen automatically. You will not be interested in them. You will not be taking care of them. It's never a good idea to live life on the autopilot. Instead, we can always think of developing great self-awareness, because that is going to be very, very useful, especially when it comes to developing relationship skills and well-being skills, and of course, leadership skills. Self-awareness is absolutely essential for each one of us, because self-awareness is the one of the first components of the self concept to emerge. Uh, I have also talked about the ocean model of personality or traits. Ocean model, if you remember, I talked about openness and then conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. How it's important for all of us to know the most important traits that each one of us has. It will help us build and sustain our relationships. I also talked about the various aspects that lead to relationships, the formation of relationships, like thoughts, and thoughts include ideas, opinions, and beliefs, and perspectives, of course. And then emotions, we all have emotions, and they keep flowing from one state to the other state every now and then. So we all know that emotions are universal, but we as individuals experience them in a certain manner, and then we respond to them in a very different way from others. It's not that I and one of you respond to our emotions in the same way. It may be that I lose my temper easily, and you do not lose that easily. Although you feel angry, but there's a difference between the anger that you feel and the anger that I feel, because we are individuals. So we approach our emotions individually and in very different ways. Once we understand that we approach our emotions in different ways, it'll be easy for us to take care of those emotions. And once we know how to take care of those emotions, how to manage those emotions, and how to regulate those emotions, building relationships and sustaining them will not at all be difficult for us. And, I also talked about how it is important for each one of us to know our strengths and weaknesses, likes and dislikes, our values and our beliefs, our motivation, and the way we approach things. So all these things, which will lead to self-discovery, will ensure that we are competent at both starting and maintaining relationships. In one of the video lectures in this module, I drew your attention towards the 6 important components of relationship skills. If you can recall, I talked about personal growth, which is very, very important. I must grow. If I do not grow, that means I'm fossilizing. I become stagnant. So if I'm growing, I must be aware of it. So we can check our personal growth periodically to ensure that we are actually growing. We are actually becoming wiser, and we are becoming better at our relationship skills. So personal growth is very, very important. And then emotional intelligence, which is very popularly referred to as EI or EQ, emotional quotient, is very, very important when it comes to building and maintaining a relationship skills. I'll be talking about emotional intelligence in a little detailed manner in a while. And then relationship management. So if we know how to manage our relationships, by managing we mean how well we can maintain our relationships. Because starting relationships is easy, and maintaining it or maintaining them is quite difficult. In order to maintain our relationships, we need to understand that we have to manage it well. So whether it's a situation that demands that we remain cool, or a situation that demands that we adopt a commanding tone, an authoritative tone to take control of the situation, all these things need to be managed well. Otherwise, we may end up messing up with our relationships or straining our relationships. And then self-regulation is very, very important, because with the help of self-regulation, we can manage our behavior. There's something called emotional labor. Just imagine you reach your office one fine day, and then suddenly the boss is very angry with you. And you suddenly begin to feel, what's the reason? I don't even know why the boss is so angry. But the boss is very angry with you. But that's the moment when you cannot retaliate by showing the same kind of anger, or more anger towards your boss, because if you do that, you may be fired. So what you do is you just keep your calm. You will somehow regulate your emotion of anger, and then somehow avoid the conflict that might arise in that situation. So self-regulation is very, very important when it comes to maintaining relationships. Then you can actually start a plan to see how much time you take to calm down after you become angry. So if the anger time, the anger duration increases, then you're actually running fast into trouble or problems. If the anger duration is decreasing, then you're doing well. So if your anger lasted for, say, 10 minutes the last time you were angry, and then the next time when you're angry, if it lasted for 7 to 8 minutes, then you know that it's gradually decreasing. It's on the decline, and you're learning how to regulate your anger. And then adaptive behavior. Not every situation will be tailor-made or fine-tuned according to our needs. We may be projected onto certain situations that are not friendly, that are challenging, that are callous, and that are very, very cruel as well. So if I know how to adapt to a certain situation, if I can develop that adaptive behavior in me, then I can take care of my relationships well. And I also talked about interpersonal relationships in one of the lecture videos in the module. And you all are familiar with interpersonal relationship skills, because these are the people skills which we all require if we have to build association, affiliation, and connection. Because interpersonal relationship skills, they require that we build association, affiliation, and connection. So with the help of these interpersonal relationship skills, we can always do that. If you also remember that in one of the videos I talked about Leffinger's relationship model, George Leffinger's relationship model, that has 5 distinct stages. How all our relationships begin with the first stage, that is the acquaintance stage, where we get to know people, we exchange smiles, or we shake hands, and then we just get to know people accidentally or somehow. And then we enter the second stage, that is a build-up stage, where we get to know more about each other, the other person's likes, dislikes, preferences, orientations, opinion, views. That's the build-up stage. And that's the stage which will determine whether we can go for a long-term relationship or not. Then that brings us to the third stage, the continuation stage. And that's the stage where relationships actually flourish, they build, and they are maintained. So they actually blossom into lasting commitments. And that's exactly where people, build trust and transparency. And then we come to the fourth stage in the Leffinger model, relationship model. The fourth stage poses several challenges to us, because this is the deterioration stage. By this time, we have become familiar with each other, and then and we know a lot of things about each other. We know each other's weaknesses, and we know each other's weak points as well. So this is the phase where our ego becomes very strong, and it might lead to the deterioration of our relationship. This is the phase where we need to apply our adaptive behavior, our self regulation, and emotional management. And with these strategies or tools, we can easily take care of this particular stage. If we do not take care of this particular stage, our relationships will lead to termination, the fifth stage. If we do not want our relationships to terminate, if we want our relationships to renew and get a new lease of life, this is exactly where we need to work on our relationship skills. And that's exactly where our relationship skills will come to our rescue. And then I have also talked about some other important aspects of relationship. Why should we get into relationships? Why are relationships important? Because they help us in the socialization process. We feel more and more comfortable in the company of people. And then when we build strong relationships, we are assured. We feel very, very comfortable. They also help us make decisions and solve problems. Because we all know a single brain alone cannot do it all. So when we have multiple brains, there is a greater chance that we'll find a better solution and we make a better decision. And then our relationships pass on positive feelings to us. They make us feel good, special, and valued. Our relationships also provide us with security and comfort. Just imagine you're away from your family for some time. The moment you reach home, you feel so special. You feel so comfortable. You feel so secure. Because whenever we are in the company of our people, our friends, our well-wishers, we feel very, very comfortable. And then, relationships also mean that we enter into a proper dialogue and engagement with our friends or the friends around us. In one of the lectures in this module, I talked about transactions, if we can recall. Transactional analysis that has been developed by Eric Berne. It's very important for each one of us to understand how transactions happen and what are the different types of transactions. So I talked about complementary transaction that generally happens between an adult and an adult. So if you ask me what's the time by your watch, I can always say, okay, this is 6:15 or 6:20 by my watch. That's complementary transaction. You ask a plain, straightforward question and you get a plain, straightforward answer. But if the transaction is crossed, fails, I may respond to your question by saying, why don't you buy your wristwatch for yourself? Instead of asking others for time, you can always find it yourself. So this is crossed transaction. So how can we avoid crossed transactions and how can we turn our possible crossed transactions into complementary transactions is a big challenge for each one of us. We need to understand the ego state of the other person. So maybe from their gestures, from their facial contours, we can decipher, we can understand the ego state of that person. So, and before telling something serious or something, important, we can always check the reality. We can always check to find in what ego state the other person is. So if you remember, when children approach their parents with some demand, they generally try to understand the mood of the parents, the ego state of the parents, so that they can propose or forward their demands. So complementary transaction that generally happens between an adult and an adult, or a parent and a child, especially the critical parent and abiding child, or the nurturing parent and the abiding child. And the crossed transaction generally happens between multiple ego states when they all are crossed. So you you also learned about the cross transactions. So it's important that we understand how these transactions generally take place and how we can take care of these transactions. And there is another type of transaction, that is ulterior transaction, or duplex transaction, where messages generally run parallel to each other. In fact, two messages run parallel to each other simultaneously. So one thing is being conveyed or communicated, or one message is being communicated. Alongside that message, another message is also being communicated simultaneously. So that is how ulterior transactions take place. And then I have also talked about something very interesting, that's stroke economy, stroke profile. We all need to develop our stroke profile to understand that strokes are very, very important when it comes to relationship situations or scenarios. So there is a positive conditional stroke that we receive for doing something. So if you give me homework, and if I perform that homework well and submit my homework to you, you'll be happy. You'll say, very good, well done, keep it up. So that is positive conditional. So stroke means the kind of response, the kind of vibes we give to people around us. It can be positive, it can be negative. So when we give a positive vibe, it can be conditional or unconditional. Conditional when we give a task and the task is completed timely. So we give our conditional positive stroke. Very good, well done, keep it up. When we continue to do things well, timely, and honestly, we will enter the zone of positive unconditional strokes. That means these are positive strokes, but there is no condition. Just imagine if you develop that credibility in yourself, people will generally say, okay, such and such can never go wrong. You haven't done anything to prove that you're right, but people will still say such and such person will never go wrong, because you have developed that credibility. So people will trust you automatically, and they will begin to give you positive unconditional strokes. Same is the case with negative strokes, negative conditional. When we do something badly, you get a negative stroke. And when you become a notorious person, then you get unconditional negative strokes. So strokes are very, very important. We all need to develop our stroke profile. We need to see that our negative strokes are gradually and rapidly decreasing, and our positive stroke boxes or grids are filling fast. So that way we can develop our stroke profile in a very strong and positive manner, and we can build our relationships well. And towards the end of this module, I talked about two very important things: empathy and emotional intelligence. We all know there are three types of empathy. There's affective empathy. I can feel the feeling of somebody. Cognitive empathy. I can understand the feeling of somebody. And compassionate empathy. I can offer some support or help to somebody. So with these three kinds of empathy, we are always in for very strong and long-term relationships. So you all know we show different signs of empathy. If you're a good listener, if you're a source of comfort, support, and advice to your friends and your family members, if you put the needs of others first before you put your needs, if you can tell the positive and the negative vibes, and if you can extend your support to people around you, then you know that you have empathy. Or we can always tell that somebody has empathy, especially if a person shows these signs. And we all know empathy skills are very important. Empathy itself is very important because it helps us overcome emotional numbness. There are people around us who are very, very passive emotionally. they will not feel any emotion. So that leads to emotional numbness. And empathy helps us overcome emotional numbness. And we experience a sense of being connected with life. And we also know that empathy leads in our social well being. Therefore, empathy is very, very important. And when you looked at emotional intelligence, you must have noticed that I talked about the science of emotional intelligence, and I also talked about the various components of emotional intelligence. So, if somebody is argumentative, unnecessarily argumentative, or repeatedly argumentative, somebody is blaming, that means two of you work on the same project. If the project fails, I promptly put the blame on you. So if I blame something on somebody all the time, then I'm very weak on emotional intelligence. I'm very low or weak on emotional intelligence. If I experience emotional outbursts, now angry, now happy, now sad, then you know I'm weak on emotional intelligence. Similarly, uh, when I resist to change, I'm very passive, unresponsive, I'm very, very critical, and I'm unnecessarily fussy. I'm emotionally unintelligent, or I have very low emotional intelligence. On the other hand, if I'm patient, I'm enthusiastic, I'm sociable, I'm strong willed, I'm decisive, and I'm detailed, neat, and I'm consistent, then I can always say I have a high level of emotional intelligence. So, with emotional intelligence, we can do a lot of things, but we need to understand that there are various models of emotional intelligence. One proposed by Peter Salovey and John Mayer, very popularly called the ability model of emotional intelligence. You might have taken a look at that. So, it has emotion perception, emotional integration, understanding emotions, and managing emotions components. Then I have also talked about the mixed model of emotional intelligence proposed by Daniel Goleman. The same thing proposed in a different manner. So it is self awareness, self regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So whether we go for this mixed model or ability model of emotional intelligence or regulation, it's important for each one of us to know that our self awareness, which includes emotional awareness as well, will help us develop a great amount of self management or self regulation. Once we know how to manage ourselves or regulate ourselves, we will always stand a very good chance of building a long term relationship. At the end of it, I can tell you all that relationships are very, very important. We cannot survive without relationships because they are the mainstay of our existence, our survival. So if we have to survive, we have to think in terms of relationships, and especially in terms of long standing relationships. And that way we come to this brief presentation on this module. It's now open to your comments, your observation, your questions and queries. So I invite all of you to come forward and put forth your ideas so that we all become wiser and richer. So thank you for your time and thank you for listening to me. Yes, we can now take your questions, your queries, your suggestions, your comments, and your observations as well.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, yes.
Sir, as you were talking about the vulnerability,
Yeah.
sir, if we talk to someone that at a place I am hurting or I am having that kind of issue and I am speaking to some person, and how can I know that this is a right person? He or she is not going to judge me for that. because
Exactly.
I am going to speak
Exactly.
all my vulnerabilities to that person. And how
Yes.
do I know that this is the perfect person for me, that I know I can trust on them and they are not going to judge me for that?
Right.
How can I find that kind of a person?
That's a very important question, of course. Most of us are faced with this particular challenge because judging is one social behavior which is negative, which is not conducive to relationships. A relationship that has this judging element will never survive for long. When we use our vulnerability as a channel, as a tool to talk to people, to discuss our problems with them, to seek their support or help from them, we need to ensure that we have already forged a very strong bonding or relationship with somebody. So if you remember, throughout this module, I have said or emphasized this particular thing that we need to build relationships first, because that relationship will turn out to be our mainstay, our main support system in times of crisis. So it will not be a good idea to be vulnerable or to seek help from somebody we do not know well. So, so therefore, it's never a good idea. So you always go to a person whom you can trust, and you share a very healthy bonding with that person. And that's the reason why, when we become very close to somebody, we call those people family. He or she is also family. So that family element, because family is symbolic of security and support. So that family element needs to be achieved first, so that we can use vulnerability as a tool, as a channel to seek help from others. Otherwise, it's not a good idea to go to anybody, any stranger, and say, I'm in trouble, please help me. Okay. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, it was answered, but I want to know that how do I know that that person is the right person? After having that relationship also, how do I
Yes.
will know that that person is the right person for me? Because opening up to anyone, that's not a good, might be they can judge me from inside, but outside they might look that they are having a solution for me. But inside they are gulping into
That
the
hardly
things that are not.
matters. That hardly matters, because if we think in those terms, then it will be very difficult for us to carry out our activities or our tasks, because anybody can judge us for that matter. For example, I'm talking to you people, you can judge me. I cannot stop people from judging me. But when we build relationships, for example, if you ask me, who are your friends with whom you can be vulnerable, I can always name them. I can give you the count. These are the 5 people with which I can be vulnerable. I can open up. I don't have any problem. Even if they judge me, I still have the trust on them. So we cannot stop people from behaving in a certain way. And we all know that there are occasions when people behave or act on 2 different planes, one the surface, one underneath. So if underneath they are judging, I cannot help that. If on the surface they are extending some help, that's important to me. And if you are afraid of this particular thing, that maybe at a later stage, this person will bring up this issue and this person will use my vulnerability against me, it will mean that that person is emotionally unintelligent or unstable. So that's the problem of that person. So when I think I have built that trust of bonding with somebody, I must feel comfortable, isn't it? So the way children feel comfortable with their parents, the way parents feel comfortable with their children, so that's a kind of trust, that's a kind of bonding. So we actually have friends with whom we can be vulnerable. So there is no fear element. The fear element cannot leave us ever. So if we continue to think that somebody will judge me, that means either we do not have that trust on them, or the relationship is not strong enough to be vulnerable. So that is the thing. So it's almost like, I'm wearing a certain type of clothes and I'm going to the market. So if I go on counting how many people may be judging me, so I'll never go to the market. Okay, so that will hardly bother me.
Hello.
I have one more question, sir.
Yes, please go ahead.
So you were talking about the emotional intelligence.
Yes.
At the present era, sir, how can we achieve that emotional intelligence so that we can be soothing ourselves, we can be relieving ourselves from the stress? Because emotional intelligence itself is a huge task for one person to attain. How can we attain that?
We can, of course, and people do attain, and people are emotionally quite intelligent. For example, we have two models right in front of us. If you take a look at any of these two models, the ability model, uh, which tells us that how well we can perceive emotions. For example, um, it may be that I'm feeling anger for some time, but I do not know that I'm feeling that emotion within myself. And when I'm unaware of it, and suddenly somebody comes to me, I may suddenly lose my cool. That person will also wonder what went wrong. This person looked quite cool, but then is behaving in a very shocking manner. The problem lies in me because I was not aware that I was gradually becoming angry. There may be something because of which I'm developing that. So we do not actually need active triggers to make us experience a certain type of emotion. And by active triggers, somebody told you something and you become angry. That is an active trigger. Somebody cursed you, you became angry. Somebody, humiliated you, insulted you, you can be angry. That is an active trigger. If you're a class teacher, your student, one of your students doesn't submit assignments in time, that's an active trigger. You can become angry. But apart from that, well within ourselves, the emotions, they rise and fall, and most often we do not even realize that. They just rise and fall. The first attempt at developing emotional intelligence is to be uh, emotionally sound in terms of perceptions. If I can perceive my emotions, if we can perceive the emotions of others, just imagine how well children know that the father is in a very bad mood, so this is not the right time to demand anything from the father. Let the father return to a positive, good, cool mood so that I can go and tell my father what I want. So they are emotionally intelligent. They can perceive the emotion of the other person. So that kind of perception we need to develop in us so that we can perceive the emotion of others. And once we perceive, we can always think of emotional integration. And that's exactly how children know when to speak to their father, when to demand something from the father, and when not to. So they know how to integrate the emotions. And then you come to understanding the emotions of others, and finally managing emotions. So we can develop emotional intelligence gradually. It won't come to us suddenly. We can develop emotional intelligence by consciously understanding our emotions, by consciously focusing on our sense. Most often we do not focus on our sense because our senses are made in such a way that they will be getting information from outside, not from inside. So we need to focus on ourselves at times to know when do I become angry? When do I become happy? What makes me happy? What kind of people make me happy? What kind of situations make me happy? Who actually makes me angry? And then I can devise a plan, an approach. If I'm doing that, that means I'm developing my emotional intelligence. And thereafter, I can regulate my emotions. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Hello. Yeah, good evening, sir.
Yes.
I am Dr. Ankita Shukla.
Yes,
Sir, my
yes.
question is that whenever someone asking same question again and again, and you don't want to give a answer of that question, so how can you handle that time? And you are
Is
irritated
it
and
similar?
frustrated about that question, and you already know that it is the question.
Okay. Is it similar to the question that you have
Yes, sir.
written in the chat box? Is it similar to the question that you have written in the chat box?
Yes, sir. No,
Okay,
no,
fine.
no, no, not sir.
Okay, this is
Not
different
sir.
from that.
That question is
Uh,
different.
Okay.
Yes.
Should I also respond to that question you have written in the chat box?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sure.
Okay, I'll start with that first. And suppose you are in a relationship and your communications is only from one-sided. Whenever you call or message, then they reply. And if you don't call or message, they don't give any response. So how can you handle your relationship that time when last 3 months they didn't connect? Of course.
Yes, sir.
Uh,
And we are
uh,
husband and wife at that time.
of course, I can understand. Uh,
Okay.
well, you see, there is an element that is called expectation. And in relationships, expectations play a very important role. Expectation is a result of our need for attention. We all want to be attended to. We all want attention. And a child who doesn't even know how to speak, how to communicate his or her ideas, still wants attention. When the child doesn't get attention, the child does something which helps it, derive or extract that attention from people around it. Attention, is something that actually makes us feel emotionally stable. When people give us attention, we are happy. We are emotionally stable. So, there's something called this eudaimonic condition. We feel happy. And when we do not have that attention, we suddenly enter uh, the realm of doubt, suspicion, frustration, anxiety, stress, and a variety of other negative stressors. Attention leads to expectation. Since I want attention, I expect my colleagues to tell me, oh, you're looking great, you're doing a great job, and all that. Since I want attention, I expect it from others. So when expectations go high, then that makes us behave in a certain manner. And that makes us emotionally less intelligent. It may be that somebody is busy and I want that somebody to call me and tell me nice, sweet things. But somebody is busy. I also need to understand that. If somebody is busy, then I need to understand that I need to wait for some time. So that may be delayed. That may not happen. That call may not happen even beyond 3 months. That message may not happen even beyond a certain time. If that is the case, if a person thinks that it is being delayed beyond a certain limit, then the person can speak to the other person. What is preventing you from maintaining this relationship? Is there any problem? Can we discuss? Can we talk about it? So you can feel comfortable while talking about me, talking about your problem to me. So these are some of those things that we can do to, get over this problem. So instead of thinking that the other person is doing this deliberately, we have every reason to think so. The moment I think so, I'll not go beyond a certain point because I'll begin to play the blame game. You never care for me. You never, give me any attention, because I'll enter into this zone of blaming. And the moment I start to blame, it will mean that I am less intelligent emotionally. So that is how we can actually address this particular problem. That's one. And the second question, can you repeat your second question? Yes, Dr. Ankita, can you repeat the second question? Okay, in the meantime, let me respond to a question from Sumani Salifu. Is there a link between emotional intelligence and patterns of communication skills? Yes. How? Of course. They are the same thing. Being emotionally intelligent will tell me when to say a certain thing and when not to say a certain, because while communicating, we say a variety of things. We don't always, say sweet things or sugar-coated words. We do not always use while communicating. It may also be that while communicating, we sound authoritative, commanding, bossy. Fine, that's perfectly fine, because my boss can always adopt that tone while speaking to me, and that's perfectly fine in an organizational scenario. And why should I feel bad about it? Isn't it? So being emotionally intelligent will help me understand that, okay, my friend, my boss, my colleague is probably struggling with some challenge. Therefore, the tone is such. The moment I understand the perspective of that particular person, I know that somebody is angry. That's my effective response. If I also know why somebody is angry, that means that's my cognitive response. I understand why somebody is angry. The same way, mothers easily understand why a child is hungry, why the child is crying. The mothers can easily tell the child is hungry, therefore the child is crying. That's emotional intelligence. So if we have emotional intelligence, it will help us overcome the challenges, the conflicts in an organizational scenario, in the professional situations. So that way there is a very strong link between emotional intelligence and patterns of communication skills. For example, transactional analysis. Okay, yes. Yes, Dr. Ankita, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Can I go ahead? I'm Olumide from Nigeria.
Hi.
I want to ask a question on emotional intelligence. If you have a boss that has low emotional quotient, very argumentative, blaming, not listening, having emotional outburst, how can you help such a person? And because of a low EQ, the situation is becoming very tense, not conducive for other staffs. And because of what I've learned from this study, how can I help such a person so that he'll be able to have a high emotional quotient? That's my question, sir.
Yes, of course. If I got your question correctly, because there was some network issue, if I got your question correctly, you're talking about developing high emotional intelligence. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, sir. Hear me now.
Can you please write your question in the chat box?
Okay, I will do.
Yeah, please do that so that I can get it correctly. Some of our participants have raised a query over certificates. Yes, of course, you'll automatically receive certificates in your profiles. Soon after the course is over, you'll receive your certificates in your profiles as well. There is a question from Rajendra Dwivedi. Are they different? Emotional communication and intelligence communication in relationships. Actually, emotional communication can turn out to be problematic at times, because if a communication has only the emotional element, it may be good at times. For example, if I tell you something that makes you happy, fine, there's no problem. But if I tell you something that makes you sad or angry or frustrated, that's probably not a good idea. So emotional communication will miss the intelligence element. So that's the reason why it is important that we combine emotion with intelligence. That means some amount of reasoning, some amount of logic is added to this, so that our communication doesn't lead to problems for us. So therefore, it's a good idea to combine intelligence with emotion. Only emotion will lead to problems. Only intelligence will also lead to problems, because you'll always think in terms of logic. You'll not care for somebody else's emotions, feelings. So that both ways it will be a problem. If we combine, we have a better chance of communicating things properly. There's a question from Sai Krishna. How can we lead the life with perfection and meanwhile handling the situations? I'm not getting this. So can you please make it clear? Handling the situations. But then that's a question that requires a sage to answer, and I'm not a sage, so that I can answer how we can lead a life with perfection. I can talk about the strategies, the life skills that we can develop in ourselves, so that we stand a better chance of leading a successful life. So, but when it comes to perfection, it is probably difficult for me to answer that question, because I do not know when we can call a life a perfect life. So it may be subjective, because if I call myself my life perfect, it may not apply on somebody else's life. So that way I will excuse myself from answering this question, Sai Krishna.
Can I ask one more question, sir?
Yes, Dr. Ankita.
I'm Neha, sir. Can I ask the
Okay,
question?
Neha, please go ahead.
Sir, as being in an office or in any institution, if you are holding a place, you are senior than me. You were talking about being authoritative. So being authoritative and using a tone that is not suitable for others, is that a good thing? Like at present, you are discussing things with us, and you are saying that if someone you said that if someone is talking in that position because he or she is a senior, then there is nothing wrong in accepting that behavior. So I want to ask you, sir, that if someone is having a higher position than me and he or she is authoritative, is that totally good that she's or he is talking in a bad tone with me?
Yes, you're right. Look at an army scenario, military scenario. Okay, so there is a leader who passes commands to a battalion or a group of soldiers who are into an operation. Okay, so there are occasions, or imagine a surgery scenario wherein the chief surgeon is passing instructions or orders to the subordinates or the assistants. There are several such scenarios wherein we can actually expect a commanding voice or commanding tone. When I say that, I do not mean that this will be a regular feature. If I speak to my colleagues in an authoritative tone or voice regularly, that will turn out to be, a negative trigger. But if there are occasions when this is demanded or this is expected, there's nothing wrong in doing that. So whenever we come across, for example, if a father issues certain commands to the child, there's nothing wrong about it, because command is one such communication activity that we also perform. There are various communication activities that we perform. For example, requesting, commanding, guiding, directing, instructing. These are some of the communication activities that we perform every day. So all these communication activities are characterized by a certain element. So there are occasions when we may have to adopt an authoritative voice to say something, and it's not bad. But that should not be a regular feature. If somebody makes it a regular feature, then you know that that person is gradually becoming less intelligent emotionally. Okay, so that is the idea. If I expect somebody to be good to me always, that will be a bad expectation, because nobody can good to a certain person always. For example, you give me a task, I mess up. How are you going to? The first time you can tell me, oh, something went wrong, you can take care of it. So be careful the next time. The second time you give me a task, I mess up again. Are you going to tell me the same thing, or this time your tone will change? It has to change, because it has to be a little stricter this time. And that's not wrong. Okay, so that's the idea. So Neha, did I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
So that is the idea. We are not supposed to be rude, authoritative, commanding all the time. There are occasions when it is demanded. The situation demands that. So we can be. And that is exactly where our empathy skills come into play. Somebody is angry. That is my initial impression. Why somebody is angry requires me to be cognitively sound. If I can understand why somebody is angry, then I can take care of that instead of emotionally reacting. I give a damn. I don't care. I don't bother. I can say that. If somebody is angry, I can always say that. I don't bother. But that will lead to a failed transaction and a failed relationship. So if I try to understand why somebody is angry, that means I can always win that situation. I can save that situation as well. So emotional intelligence means we switch roles. So that is it. There is a response in the chat box from Esther. Most of our life skills are overlapping. For example, having emotionally intelligent leads to empathy. If you have emotion management, this leads to emotional intelligence and empathy, good relations and communication. Of course, there is no doubt about it. There is one thing, one element that combines all these skills. Life. Life is the only thing that combines all these skills. So when we talk of life skills, we're actually focusing on life as a single unit. So we can always imagine that all these skills will lead towards one goal, that is life, a successful life. So that is it. Therefore, all these life skills, they merge. They not only overlap, at one point they merge and they become one, and that is life. So that's true. How can empathy dissolve bias? Yes, of course. That's a very interesting question, Sonal. Empathy will dissolve bias because we are used to biased approaches or prejudiced approaches towards something. We can say people from a certain place are not trustworthy. We have never interacted anybody from that place. Still, our historical understanding, our historical knowledge, the historical information tells us or have informed us that we don't have to trust people from a certain place. They're not trustworthy. So that is low empathy and low emotional intelligence. Low empathy because we don't even understand, don't even know people from that place. When we begin to interact, try to understand them, then we'll be in a better position to say that. Otherwise, it will not be good or right for us to say so. So when we actually begin to interact with people from that particular place or that particular community, we will be in a better position to understand their beliefs and their opinion, their thought, their views, and that will help us understand them better. The moment we understand them better, we are actually dissolving this bias. So empathy plays a very important role in dissolving bias.
Sir, what is transaction?
Yes, I'm coming to that question. What is transaction? You know, whenever a transaction happens, something is done. So through transactions, certain actions are performed or certain things are done. For example, if I tell you, can you give me a glass of water? You can say, yes, I'll give you one. The moment you give me a glass of water, the transaction is done. It is complete. If I tell you, can you give me a glass of water? And the moment you tell me, yes, I'm giving you a glass of water. So it is done. And when I ask you the same question, can you give me a glass of water? Then if you say, why don't you get that for yourself? That means the transaction has failed. It is not successful. It is not complementary. Okay. So it is not successful and it is not complementary. So that moment, the transaction is incomplete. The transaction has failed and it is an instance of a crossed transaction. So that way, it is a failed transaction. Okay, so that is transaction.
Sir,
Fine.
their types cannot be I understood.
Yes.
Their types I cannot understood.
Which types?
Their transaction type I cannot understood. What
Okay.
are situation?
Okay. All right. Let me tell you, there are two types of transactions, popular types of transactions. There's a third type of transaction as well. Type 1, complementary transaction. Complementary transaction means you tell somebody something and the person agrees. It can be asking for a glass of water. It can be giving a command, giving an instruction, telling somebody that you always come late to the office. Or if you tell somebody that, please come in time. So you're telling somebody something. And if the person agrees to it, yes, I'll take care. I'll come in time. Yes, I'll give you a glass of water. That means the transaction is complete and it is complementary. It is not failed, it is successful. The moment the reply is different, challenging, it is not complete. It is failed transaction. I ask you, Abhishek, can you please give me a glass of water? If you tell me, yes, sir, I'll give you a glass of water. It is complete, successful. The moment you tell, Can't you get it for yourself? Why don't you get a glass of water for yourself? Why are you asking me? This is a failed transaction because you're not going to give me a glass of water. The transaction doesn't happen. Plus, you will always hit back at me. So it's a failed transaction. So when a transaction fails, it will not lead to any relationships because I'll feel bad and then I'll never ask you to give me a glass of water. And you'll also feel bad. You'll never give me a glass of water. So that way it will be a failed transaction. Okay. So that's it. Fine then. Do we have any further questions for today's session? I can take one last question before we end today's session. One last question. Somebody can unmute oneself and ask that question. Okay. If we do not have any further questions, shall
Sir,
we
what
call
is
it?
difference between emotional intelligence and EQ?
No, there's no difference. These are different ways to name the same thing. Emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. EQ stands for emotional quotient, and EI stands for emotional intelligence. They mean the same thing. The amount of emotional intelligence we have in us is what we mean by EQ, the emotional quotient. In the same way we mean by IQ, intelligence quotient that we have. The amount of intelligence that we have can be determined by IQ quotient. And the amount of emotional intelligence we have can be determined by EQ, that's emotional quotient. The amount of emotional intelligence we have. They mean the same thing. Okay?
Yes, sir. Okay.
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. Thank you, everyone, for being there and for your time, for your interest in the course, for your participation, very active participation in the course and in the live sessions as well. So that way we come to the end of the live session on Module 3, Relationship Skills. And when I meet you tomorrow for another live session, I'll be talking about thinking skills, a very important life skill you all have discovered by now. So I'll see you again. Bye-bye. So thank you for joining.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. So thank you for joining.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.